I found a weird pattern in wife's behavior and knew something's fishy until her guilt took over and made her leave the house. My wife and I met when we were teenagers, and we were both having our V cards. I'd had a couple of previous girlfriends, but my wife had never kissed or held hands. She pursued me while I was already in a relationship, which ended quickly when my girlfriend at the time cheated on me. In retrospect, I now realize that, despite wanting to, in my entire life I've never approached a woman or asked one out. After a few months of dating, we became exclusive. She was bright and talented, not necessarily pretty, but a good person with a big heart. I fell for her, and am still in love with her, all of these years later. As a hormonal teen, I was frustrated by how slowly our physical relationship progressed, but I really did love her, and I didn't want to make her feel pressured in any way. I figured I was in this for the long haul. In the end, we were together for well over 2 years before we slept together for the first time. It was comfortable and relaxed, and much to my surprise she came. A year later we married. We always got along well, with the normal level of young married hiccups. Our intimacy, however, really suffered. I am a very sexual person and have, taken matters into my own hands between 5 to 10 times a day, every day, since I was 12 or so. I have a very short refractory period, so I'm usually ready to go again within a few minutes, but in 30 years I can think of only 1 or 2 occasions when my wife was interested in a second round. I knew I had a much higher libido than she did, and I really struggled to keep on an even mental and emotional keel with our mismatched drives, something which continues to this day. Worse than the frequency, maybe 2 to 3 times a month, I'd be up for every day, but could be happy with 3 times a week, was the feeling that it was all for my benefit, that it was all just Mercy's ex. With my very limited sexual experience, I figured this was just part of the differences between men and women, although I could recall some of my previous girlfriends being very, very passionate. It still hurts to not feel wanted or desired. Due to some infertility issues on her part, we had children later in life. Her libido went through the roof during pregnancy, but not for me. I'd come home every day and find sex toys and magazines in the bed, but she'd still turn me down. I'd been rejected so often that I felt completely undesirable, and frankly still do. I tried talking to her about how it made me feel, but despite my insisting that it wasn't the case, she concluded that my problem was the fact that she herself at all. Frankly, I find it hot as hell, and told her so. I just didn't want to feel like it was a replacement for me. She flipped out, and still brings it up now, a couple of decades later. I still can't make her understand that it was the contrast between our non-existent sex life and her solitary activities that bothered me. Our lovemaking normally consists of her reading erotica while I touch her until she comes, after which she lets me climb on top of her. She rarely touches me. If I kiss her, she turns away. There's nothing I can do to arouse her. No matter how hard I try, she needs to read or view adult materials. It's been this way for all but the first year or 2 of our relationship. She doesn't like to give or receive mouth, toys are only for her when she's alone. I've laid awake at night crying, imagining what it must be like to have someone look at me with desire, to have someone touch or kiss me like they wanted me, replaying the same dozen experiences with previous girlfriends when I was a young teenager through my mind. I feel pathetic. I travel sometimes for work, and I've been approached by other women. I've always been completely faithful to my wife. Objectively, I know I'm a decent-looking guy, I'm in okay shape, I'm well-educated, and have a great professional career. Logically, I know all of that, but internally I feel like I must be awful and unlovable. We've been to marriage counselors periodically throughout our marriage, but my wife always insists that everything's fine. We go to address my feelings about our relationship. Last night I lost it again, and had one of my breakdowns with her. These have become more common over the last year or 2, I'm not proud to say. For the first time she said something which snapped it all into focus for me. She told me that she thinks she might be gay. I knew she was attracted to women, she'd told me that early on, but I'd assumed she was bi. My wife might be gay. All of my feelings of being unwanted, of being undesired, nearly all of my sexual experiences were with someone who didn't want me in the first place. I am numb. I'm in shock. I feel like I've lost my entire sexual life, which is a huge part of me, and it's all wasted, all gone, my youth, my virility, it's all gone. I want to die. It's my worst nightmare, the fact that it was all for nothing, the fact that it wasn't just me, the fact that it was my inexperience that blinded me to the fact that this wasn't normal. It's all been taken from me, and there's nothing I can do to bring it back. Edit, my wife seems to think that this changes nothing. She actually shrugged and changed the subject afterwards. I know she would never consider opening the relationship, and with our teenage children, and my providing 99% of our income, a divorce is going to be brutal. I am so lost, I have no idea what to do next. Edit 2, I really appreciate the comments, I've read them all. I do want to clarify something. I know that I have an unusual libido. I would never expect a partner to match that. It's been years since I've approached her more than once a week. It's honestly not the frequency that bothers me. I'd be, well, not thrilled, but basically okay with the current 2 to 3 times a month if it felt like she actually wanted or desired me. I just want to be touched or acknowledged in some way, not ignored or treated like a chore. To add to the irony, I started developing ED about 10 years ago, but only when she's around, so I have to take pills to perform. I've clearly conditioned myself into an unhealthy place. Update, I appreciate all of the comments, I've read them all. I've been drinking, something I rarely do, so my apologies in advance. I do want to clarify a few things that multiple folks brought up. I know now that I'm sexually unusual, but given my relative lack of experience, I always assumed I was average. It never occurred to me that it was even possible that any partner could, or would want to, match me. I very rarely approached my wife more than once a week, let alone multiple times a day. I'm not going to say that I'm happy with being intimate a couple of times a month, but that has never been my primary issue with our sex life. As I mentioned in my post and in my replies, my wife will not touch or look at me when we're intimate. I touch her while she reads erotica, and after she finishes she allows me to climb on her. It's clearly a chore, not something she enjoys, and it hurts me like hell. That lack of experience also led me to assume that my wife was average, and that women in general just weren't sexual. I know that sounds hard to believe, as saturated as our culture is with sex, but for every reference to a sexy woman there's another to a disinterested wife being pestered by her husband, and I believe the one that fit with my experience. I have never felt wanted or physically desired in any way, save for a couple of girlfriends in my early teens, and I'd managed to rationalize even that as being about something different than the possibility that they were attracted to me sexually. I am no doormat. I have a strong personality, and I tend to be very dominant, both socially and professionally. I did not sit idly by and suffer all of these years. Once it began to dawn on me that there really was something wrong, I had multiple tear-filled conversations with my wife about our intimate life. I begged, pleaded, and demanded counseling on multiple occasions. In front of the counselors she'd insist everything was fine, she loved me, which I believe, was attracted to me, enjoyed our love life, and it was all just in my head. I honestly don't know if she believes she's telling the truth, maybe she is. When I talked about the idea of divorce being brutal, I wasn't talking about finances. I'm talking about the act of breaking up a family with beautiful young teen children, and a wife who is completely dependent on me, a wife I happen to love. I'm talking about the betrayal she'll feel and the emotional pain of ending 30 years together, not something as meaningless as money. I'm sorry for the rant. I confronted her last night about her throwaway comment about thinking she might be gay. When she first said it, she shrugged it off and changed the subject. I asked her what she thought that meant for a relationship. I knew she'd never accept an open relationship or divorce, and I was right. She insisted that whether it was true or not, it changed nothing, that she'd been a good wife and would continue to do so. She burst into tears at the very thought that our marriage was threatened, and it took me more than an hour to calm her down again. She was completely destroyed at the thought. In a way, she's right, it doesn't really matter why our sex life is what it is. She promised more frequency, which she's done previously, but I know that within a few months things will just revert back, and the low frequency isn't the part that hurts the most anyway. I have no idea what to do or where to go from here. I can't cheat on her. I love her and my family, I can't destroy them. I want to die. I want to castrate myself so that I don't have these feelings anymore. I just want to carve sex out of me. I'm going to ask my doctor for Prozac and hope that it kills my libido, and I honestly feel like that's my only hope. If it doesn't work, I don't know how I'm going to make it. I can't go on feeling this way. Edit, I appreciate all of the responses. I'm still drinking, so I'm a bit numb, sorry if I don't make much sense. I don't even really drink. I can't go on like this. I'm going to have an affair. I hate that I'm in this place, hate the dishonesty and ugliness of it all, hate what it's doing to me. I don't want to be this person. I hope that she'll never know, I can't let her know. I can't do that to my family. I have no idea how I'm going to go about this. I've never, ever approached a woman in my entire life. I'm incredibly inexperienced. I'm physically very recognizable, and while I don't live in a small town, I am very well known. I may not be able to do it at all, but I feel some relief in the decision. I feel a bit lighter. We'll see if I still feel the same way I feel after I sober up. Thanks for all of the good advice. Update. Okay, I'm sober this time. I don't really drink, maybe a couple of beers a month, and obviously there's a reason. Some of my thinking was pretty suspect, and some other things have happened as well. I really don't appreciate some of the nasty PMs. As I'd said before, I know that I'm sexually unusual. It is something I have never, ever imposed on my wife, nor would I. It is not something that I ever had any expectation of accommodation in any relationship. It is something I do my best to keep to myself. It is something that I did not even realize was unusual until not that long ago. This is the first place I've ever shared it, and I'll likely be more careful before doing so again. When I'd made the last update, and while I'd been drinking, I'd managed to reconcile myself to the idea of having an affair, which seemed the least painful road for all involved. Now that I'm sober, it's obvious idiocy. I don't want to give too many details, but I am physically distinctive and very recognizable in our community. We live in a medium-sized city, and I have a fairly high profile here. I am not someone who can expect to enjoy any anonymity within a fairly wide radius. Even if I managed to convince myself that this was an acceptable thing for me to do, I'd never, ever be able to pull it off. I had another big discussion with my wife last night. She's walked back her statement about thinking she might be gay, and insists that she's very attracted to men. I'm at a point where it doesn't really matter very much either way. It's sunk in that our intimate relationship isn't normal, that it really can be different, and after so many years and so much effort, the specific reasons why we can't have that together just don't seem that important anymore. She may or may not like men, but no matter how much she says otherwise, she certainly doesn't want me, not in a way that I need to be wanted. My wife suggested counseling again, and my heart did pick up a bit at that. That didn't last long. When I asked if she'd be willing to see a sex therapist with me, she gave a puzzled look and asked why I thought that would help with my insecurity, and said that I need a proper counselor to help me through that. It's still my feelings that are the problem. This is where it gets really weird, and I'm still trying to process what happened. I told her flatly that our sex life was not okay, that my very real insecurities about it were not in my head, but were directly caused by the problems in our sex life. This is not the first time I've said this to her. I told her I could not survive like this, no matter how much I loved her, or how much I wished I could handle it, and that if we could not fix this, we would either have to open the relationship or we'd have to divorce. I felt awful saying it. I had to blurt it out. It felt like I was physically hitting her when I said it, and she reacted just as if I had. She collapsed again, sobbing, and I was sobbing along with her. I held her for over half an hour, trying to calm her down, and then she aggressively initiated mouth sex. This is only the third time in 33 years she's given me mouth sex, the first time in well over 25 years, and the first time she's ever initiated it. She was very sexually aggressive, something she's never, ever been. I am not going to deny that I enjoyed it, although the sight of her there with mascara running down her face made me feel uncomfortably close to misustive. In the back of my mind, though, was the insistent feeling that this wasn't about her attraction to me, wasn't about sexual feelings between us at all. I realized that, even if I convinced her to see a sex therapist, even if I could flip a switch and make our intimate life something like what I imagine a normal one looks like, I would always have this doubt that she actually wanted me, was actually attracted to me at all. I'd never be able to tell whether it was just an act for my benefit or not. I don't know why the difference feels so important to me, but it does. The saddest part? The first time in decades I have the chance to experience something like this, something I've dreamed about, and I'm so wrapped up in my head that I'm almost completely distracted from the physical sensations. Part of me feels ridiculously needy for needing to feel wanted, needing this sort of validation from another person in the first place, but after stuffing it down for so long it's overwhelming me. I know that I can't go on like this and keep my head. I'm pretty much back where I started. I may have frightened her enough into shaking up our sex life, but it almost feels like I've emotionally misused her to get to this point, which feels deeply icky. I doubt that the change is anything but brief, but I'm trying to keep an open mind, and if it does have any legs, I'll do my best to deal with my own doubts about her motivations. Update. It's been about 8 months since my last post, and a bunch has happened. As I suspected, my wife's newfound interest in me was very short-lived, and after less than a week it was as if nothing had ever happened. With what felt like no good options in front of me, I took what will sound like some extreme measures. I went to my GP with a greatly abbreviated explanation of my problem and asked for an SSRI. She prescribed me citalopram at 20 milligrams, which flattened me out a bit but didn't really help, before upping me to 40 milligrams. I didn't tell my wife, because I really didn't have the energy to open that can of worms again. Within just a few days everything, and I mean everything, changed. My libido is gone. For the first time since I was 10 years old, I can happily go for more than a day without an orgasm. It's amazing, I now see how much time and energy I had spent through my entire life thinking about sex, and it's all gone. It's as if there's 90 minutes in an hour now. I would never have guessed that sex took up so much of my life, until I'm presented with the hole where it was. I was afraid that I'd miss it, but I just don't care. That's part of the problem. I don't care a whole lot about much of anything. I had been pretty passionate about all kinds of subjects, and now? Meh. After a few months I noticed the impact on my work. I'm very successful in my field, and my creativity has been a big part of my success. I have to really work at it now, where it all just kind of flowed out before. Scarier is the fact that, while I still love my wife and children, even that feels muted compared to the way I felt before. There was no denying that I felt better than at any point I could recall in my marriage, though. I thought I'd found the answer until Monday, and it's no one's fault but mine. My wife mentioned something about me seeming to lose my fire after one of her relatives said something that would normally get a passionate response from me. I said nothing. I have no idea why I responded like I did, but I was an idiot. I told her that my fire had been in my balls, and that since feeling desired in a sexual relationship with her wasn't on the table, I had to choose between getting that from another woman or cutting my balls off with a dull knife. It was a horrible, hateful thing to say, and the part one don't understand is that I wasn't even feeling hateful at all when I said it. I just didn't care. She melted down and I didn't feel a thing, which still scares me. She got more and more worked up, and I left the room to give her space. At some point in the evening I realized she'd left the house. She texted me the next morning to tell me she's staying with some neighborhood friends until I cool down. I'm here with the kids, and we're fine. I needed an excuse to take a few days off anyway, and we've had a nice, quiet holiday. I'm really afraid to find out how much of this is the citalopram. I don't really care if she comes back, and I find myself fantasizing about the possibility that she won't. I feel like, even if she did leave, I could never stop taking it, as I don't want to face the pain I think is waiting for me if I've destroyed my family. We have reached the end of the story. Let's listen to some of the comments by our Reddit listeners. Comment 1. My heart broke when I read your post. Your life isn't over. Do you want to stay with your wife? Would she be willing to open the marriage? What else did she say? Did she apologize knowing how hurt you were? OP reply. That's just it. It was almost a completely casual comment. I think she honestly thinks that it changes nothing. I looked at her with what I imagined to be a look of grief and horror, and she shrugged her shoulders and changed the subject. I am completely lost. I have no idea what to do next. Comment 2. People duck until they die, but it's a little late to be lamenting not screwing enough 19-year-olds. You can still rediscover your sexual self at 50 though. Your life is not over. You've accomplished much in those 30 years, so they were certainly not wasted. If the kids are out of the house and all, then speak with your wife about opening up the relationship, or divorce her. Comment 3. Yeah, it's pretty messed up that his wife doesn't want to open up the marriage, doesn't want to get divorced, and is only willing to increase the frequency they are having sex. She's completely ignoring the root of the problem and basically saying she is fine with OP being miserable as long as she can keep living life the way she's been living it.